"You underestimated me, Officer Reynolds, but the truth always finds a way." What could cause a courtroom to fall into complete silence? A white ICE officer accuses a Latina woman of resisting arrest and assaulting him, claiming she's an undocumented immigrant. His story is compelling, flawless, until she takes the stand and turns the entire case around. Who is she, and why does her testimony leave the officer, the jury, and even the judge completely stunned? This is the story of how a single lie unraveled, and how a simple struggle for survival turned into a fight for truth and justice. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glow. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted in their seats, some community members, others reporters hungry for a scoop. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick with curiosity and silent judgment. At the defense table sat Isabela Cruz. Her caramel-toned skin barely glowed under the sterile lights. Her long dark hair was tied in a low braid. She wore a simple white blouse and dark pants, carefully chosen not to appear threatening. But her posture told a different story. Sitting upright, shoulders squared, eyes fixed, she radiated determination. Across the room sat Officer Mark Reynolds at the prosecution table, impeccable in his ICE uniform. His arrogant expression suggested he already believed he'd won. Years of unchecked authority had taught him one thing: people like Isabela didn't stand a chance. The bailiff called the courtroom to order as Judge Robert Hansen entered. A middle-aged white man with sharp features and tired eyes, worn from too many cases he'd rather forget. "State versus Isabela Cruz," the bailiff announced. Isabela didn't flinch. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we are here today because this woman resisted a lawful arrest and assaulted a federal officer. She refused to show ID and posed a flight risk. Officer Reynolds acted well within his authority." Isabela's lawyer, Sophia Morales, shifted nervously in her seat. Fresh out of law school, this was her first high-profile case. She glanced at Isabela, searching for a sign of comfort, but Isabela's eyes remained fixed on the judge, unreadable. Reynolds took the stand with a smug smile, oozing confidence. "I approached the suspect in front of a grocery store. She was loitering, acting suspicious. When I asked for ID, she refused and became aggressive. She grabbed my arm and tried to run." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Isabela remained still, her face serene. The judge raised an eyebrow but said nothing. At that moment, the scales of justice seemed already tipped. But Isabela knew something no one else did. The prosecutor's voice rang out. "Officer Reynolds, would you say the defendant posed a threat to public safety?" Without hesitation, Reynolds answered, "Absolutely. She was hostile and uncooperative. I feared for my safety." His words hung in the air, heavy and damning. But Isabela's face didn't change. No anger, no fear, only calm determination. "Thank you, Officer Reynolds," the prosecutor concluded. Reynolds stepped down, still smirking. Judge Hansen turned to Isabela. "Miss Cruz, it's your turn to testify." Isabela stood slowly, smoothing her clothes. She bowed slightly and spoke in a calm yet piercing voice. "I deny everything." A wave of whispers rippled through the room. The prosecutor scoffed. "So you're calling a decorated ICE officer a liar?" Isabela's dark eyes met his. "What I'm saying is, his version of the truth is convenient." More gasps followed. The judge banged his gavel for order. Sophia leaned in, whispering urgently, "Isabela, we need more than that." But Isabela responded cryptically, "The truth always finds its way. Just wait." Sophia's nerves tightened, but there was something in Isabella's tone, something powerful and in control. A storm was coming, and no one in that courtroom was ready. Whispers filled the room as Isabella's bold statement lingered. Even Judge Hanson seemed surprised for a moment before regaining his composure. The prosecutor approached the stand again. "Miss Cruz, if Officer Reynolds is lying, what really happened that day?" Isabella's fingers gently gripped the edge of the witness stand, her knuckles pale. Though her face remained calm, she took a measured breath before answering. "I was leaving the grocery store," she began firmly. "I had picked up a few things: milk, bread, coffee. I was texting my sister when Officer Reynolds approached me." The prosecutor leaned in, trying to seize the moment. "And when he asked for your ID?" "I asked why he needed it," Isabela replied. "I wasn't loitering or bothering anyone. I was just outside, checking my phone." The prosecutor forced a smile. "And when he decided you were undocumented?" Isabela clenched her jaw. "He didn't suspect. He decided, based on how I looked." A wave of tension swept through the courtroom. "He grabbed my arm before I could even reach for my wallet," she continued, her voice calm but intense. "I told him he was making a mistake. He didn't care." At the prosecution table, Officer Reynolds began to shift uncomfortably. A crack in his arrogant mask appearing for the first time, the prosecutor, flustered, tried to steer the narrative. "Miss Cruz, did you resist when he tried to detain you?" "I told him to let go," she said. "I didn't push him, I didn't run, but he twisted my arm and slammed me against the patrol car." Gasps echoed again. The judge struck his gavel. "Order!" But the murmurs persisted. Reynolds' lawyer glanced at him nervously while the officer tried to keep his composure. And then Isabela delivered the final blow. "He told me," she said with unwavering voice, "people like you don't belong here." The room erupted in shocked whispers. The judge slammed the gavel even harder. "Order! Order in this courtroom!" Sophia leaned in, eyes wide. "Do you have proof of that?" Isabela turned to her with a serene expression. "Not yet, but I will." Sophia's heart pounded. What was Isabela hiding? One thing was clear. Reynolds' carefully crafted lies were starting to unravel. As the session recessed and footsteps echoed down the marble halls, reporters crowded the entrance, capturing every whisper of Isabela's shocking testimony. Inside a small, dimly lit conference room, Sofia Morales paced nervously, clutching her notepad. Across from her, Isabela sat still, so composed she seemed almost inhuman. "You need to tell me what's going on," Sophia urged, voice tight with anxiety. "That line, what Reynolds said, it's powerful. But we need more. If we don't have hard evidence, the judge won't throw out the charges." Isabela sighed and leaned back in her chair. "I know." "Then help me," Sophia cried, her voice cracking. "You're hiding something. I can see it." Isabela's eyes softened, revealing a flicker of something. Pain, or maybe strength. Finally, she spoke. "I've been through worse than this," she said quietly. Sophia stopped cold. "What do you mean?" Isabela reached into her bag and pulled out a worn leather folder. She slid it across the table to Sophia. "Open it." With trembling hands, Sophia opened the folder. Inside were official documents, service records, commendations, medals, and photographs. Sophia's breath caught. "You're a Navy SEAL?" "Lieutenant Commander," Isabela confirmed. 15 years. I retired last year." Sophia's mind raced. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier? We could have ended the case today." Isabela shook her head. "If I'd revealed it too soon, Reynolds would have covered his tracks. I needed him to feel safe. Safe enough to keep lying. Sophia collapsed into a chair, the weight of the revelation hitting her hard. You risked everything. I've risked my life for this country more times than I can count, Isabela said, her voice low but firm. But people like Reynolds don't see that. They only see my skin color, my last name, and assume the worst. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, but she wiped them away. We'll win this. We have to. A slight smile curved Isabela's lips. Tomorrow, we finish this. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Sunlight cast long shadows across the floor, but inside, the atmosphere was heavier than ever. The courtroom was even more crowded than the day before. Word had spread. Journalists filled the benches, notebooks and cameras in hand. It was no longer just about Isabela Cruz. It was about exposing something deeper. Isabela sat at the defense table, her face calm but filled with quiet strength. Beside her, Sophia fidgeted nervously, now armed with the most powerful weapon, the truth. The gavel struck. Judge Hanson called the court to order. We will continue with the case of State versus Isabela Cruz, he said, looking at both parties. Prosecution. Your witness. The prosecutor stood. We would like to recall Officer Reynolds to clarify a few points. Reynolds stepped up, still confident but visibly less arrogant than before. There was a tightness in his jaw and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his uniform. Sophia rose, calm but firm. Officer Reynolds, she began, her voice clear in the silent courtroom. You testified that my client resisted arrest and assaulted you, correct? Yes, Reynolds replied, his voice noticeably tense. And your body cam malfunctioned during the incident? That's right. Sophia walked slowly, deliberately. How often does your body cam fail during arrests? A drop of sweat appeared on Reynolds' temple. It happens. Technology isn't perfect, he muttered. Of course, Sophia replied smoothly. But on that day, during that arrest, when you claim a woman was violent and aggressive, your camera conveniently failed. Reynolds shifted in his seat. Yes, he said. Sophia stopped walking. That's interesting, she said, because a witness recorded the entire encounter. Gasps swept through the courtroom. Reynolds' face turned pale. Judge Hanson banged the gavel. Order. Counselor, he asked, do you have that recording? Yes, Your Honor, Sophia replied. She handed a USB drive to the bailiff. Moments later, a grainy video appeared on the courtroom screen. The room went completely silent. The footage showed Reynolds approaching Isabela outside the grocery store. His voice was aggressive from the start. Show me your ID, now, he barked. Isabela remained calm. May I ask why? She responded. Reynolds grabbed her arm. You don't belong here. I can spot illegals from a mile away. The room collectively exhaled in shock. The video continued. Isabela stood her ground, speaking evenly. I'm a citizen, she said. Reynolds slammed her against the patrol car, twisting her arm. People like you don't get to talk back, he said. The screen went black. The silence was deafening. Reynolds sat frozen, his mask shattered. Sophia turned to the judge. Your Honor, I believe this directly contradicts Officer Reynolds' testimony. The judge's face turned stone-like. It certainly raises serious doubts. The case was crumbling, but Isabela wasn't finished yet. The courtroom was buzzing, people whispering, reporters scribbling notes. Reynolds sat pale and speechless at the prosecution's table. Sophia leaned toward Isabela and whispered, "We've got him cornered. Are you ready?" Isabella's calm eyes didn't waver. "It's time." She stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, may I speak directly to the court?" Judge Hanson studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Go ahead." Isabela stepped to the center of the courtroom, dozens of eyes on her. Her hand steady, her voice serene, she began, "Everyone here has heard the lies," she said. "You've seen the truth unravel in that video. But there's something you don't know yet, something that makes this injustice even worse." She pulled an elegant leather folder from her blazer and opened it slowly, revealing her credentials. "I am Lieutenant Commander Isabela A. Cruz," she declared. "I served 15 years as a Navy SEAL." The courtroom exploded in gasps and exclamations. Reporters scrambled to write. Even the judge seemed stunned before quickly striking his gavel. "Order! Order in this courtroom!" But Isabela wasn't shaken. "I have served this country with everything I have," she continued. "I've fought in war zones, led missions most people will never hear about. And yet, when I was on that sidewalk, shopping in my own city, none of that mattered. All Officer Reynolds saw was my skin color, my heritage, and that was enough for him." Silence fell, heavy and emotional. Isabela's voice cracked slightly, but her strength held. "I've shed blood for this country, for the freedom we all claim to believe in. But where was that freedom when he tried to strip mine away, without cause, without proof, just because I'm Latina?" Even Judge Hanson looked visibly moved. Sophia stared in awe, tears brimming in her eyes. Isabela took a deep breath and concluded, "This case isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been profiled, harassed, and silenced. But I won't be silenced." The courtroom erupted into applause. A rare breach of protocol, but in that moment, no one cared. Judge Hanson pounded his gavel, his voice thick with emotion. "I believe we've seen enough. This court will reconvene tomorrow for my final verdict." But the truth was already clear. Isabela Cruz had won more than her freedom. She had exposed a system designed to break people like her, and she did it by standing tall. The courtroom slowly emptied, leaving behind the echo of explosive revelations. Isabela remained seated at the defense table, hands folded. Though her heart pounded, the sound of applause still echoed in her ears, something she never expected. For a brief moment, the weight of the trial lifted, replaced by a bittersweet sense of validation. Sophia gathered her papers with trembling hands. She began, but the words caught in her throat. "You were incredible." Isabela offered a faint smile. "I didn't do it to be." "Still," Sophia continued softly, "what you did, revealing your past as a Navy SEAL, that changed everything." Isabela's eyes drifted to the now empty witness stand. "It shouldn't have to come to that," she said quietly. "I shouldn't need a military record to prove I belong." Sophia's voice cracked. She knew Isabela was right. The system was deeply broken. At that moment, Judge Hanson emerged from his chambers, still in his robe, and approached the defense table, unusually informal. "Miss Cruz," he began, his voice rough but not unkind, "I've presided over countless cases. I've seen people lie under oath, twist the truth. But today, I saw something different. Your testimony, your courage, forced this court to face a hard reality." Isabela nodded calmly. "I can't comment on the verdict yet," the judge added, "but thank you for your service." She met his gaze and replied, "Thank you, Your Honor. But I hope you remember, not everyone who stands in this courtroom will have the kind of proof I did." The judge paused for a moment. then nodded solemnly and left. That brief exchange hung in the air, reminding everyone many would never get the same chance. The next day, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Reporters lined the walls, microphones in hand. It felt like the entire city had shown up to hear the verdict. Isabela once again sat at the defense table, calm but resolved. She was prepared for anything. Beside her, Sophia tapped her pen nervously against her notebook. Judge Hansen entered, gavel in hand, his face unreadable. The room fell into a heavy silence. "This court has reviewed all submitted evidence," the judge began. "The video, witness testimony, and the defendant's military record have all been taken into full consideration." Isabela remained still, feeling the thud of her heartbeat. It is clear that Officer Reynolds fabricated his report, violated protocol, and acted based on racial bias. A collective gasp filled the room. "Therefore, the charges against Miss Isabela Cruz are dismissed," Judge Hansen declared, slamming the gavel. "In addition, this court recommends that Officer Reynolds be suspended pending a full investigation into his conduct." The courtroom exploded in celebration. Sophia threw her arms around Isabela. "You did it!" "We did it," Isabela replied softly. But she remained quiet, letting the moment sink in. Relief washed over her. But so did a deep sadness. She had won, but how many others had lost in silence? In a corner of the courtroom, Reynolds sat, pale and furious, watching as his career unraveled before his eyes. Isabela rose and turned to face the crowd. Strangers who were now cheering, some clapping, others wiping away quiet tears. She hadn't just fought for herself. She had fought for all of them. Outside, reporters surged toward her. "Miss Cruz, how does it feel to be vindicated? Do you have a message for Officer Reynolds?" Isabela raised a hand to quiet the crowd. She spoke with firm, unwavering clarity. "Today, I didn't come here just as a Navy SEAL or as a wrongly accused Latina woman. I came here for every person who has been profiled, silenced, and treated as less than. Today, I was lucky enough to be heard, but no one should need medals or a military record for that to happen." The crowd fell silent, absorbing every word. And with that, Isabela descended the courthouse steps, not as a victim, but as a warrior who had revealed the truth weeks later. Isabela stood on the rooftop of a community center, the city skyline stretching behind her. Below, a group of young Latina girls practiced self-defense moves, their laughter and voices filling the air. Sophia approached, holding 2 coffees. "I thought you might need this," she said. Isabela smiled, accepting one. "Thank you." "You've really started something here," Sophia noted, glancing at the girls. "Defense classes, support programs. It's incredible." "It's just the beginning," Isabela replied. "After the trial, I realized fighting in court isn't enough. I have to fight out here, too." Sophia sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "And the Navy, do you miss it?" Isabela hesitated before answering. "Every day." Then she smiled softly. "But this," she said, looking down at the girls, "this is what I was meant to do now." She hadn't just reclaimed her freedom, she had reclaimed her power. And now she was making sure others could do the same.